Welcome to this deep dive. This is for you, the learner, looking to, get up to speed quickly without feeling totally swamped. Today, we're looking into something we all do, but maybe don't think about much. It's this idea of, well, behavioral autopilot. Like those times you drive somewhere familiar, get there, and realize you barely remember the actual drive.
Exactly. That's a perfect example.
That's just scratching the surface, right? So our mission today is to unpack these hidden drivers, find some surprising insights, and maybe some ways to become more aware.
That driving example, it really gets to the heart of it. So much of what we do just happens outside our immediate focus.
Right.
In psychology, especially from a Gestalt view, we talk about figure ground.
Figure graph, okay.
So in that driving scenario, your thoughts, maybe what you're worrying about or planning, that's the figure. It's what's
Yeah.
sharp in your awareness and the driving itself. All those complex actions, that just fades onto the ground. It's there, it's happening, but it's background.
Yeah. Wow, okay. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
That something so involved like driving can just recede like that. It makes you wonder, though, if our minds can automate that, what else is running back there? Bigger things, decisions, reactions, how we structure our days. Are we really consciously driving, or is a lot of it autopilot?
Well, that's the big question, isn't it? And the neuroscience is pretty startling, actually.
Oh,
Some research suggests, and it's a debated number, but still high, that maybe up to 95% of our daily actions are automatic.
95%. Seriously.
It's a huge figure. And it really pushes against our gut feeling, our sense of being in charge, making constant choices.
Definitely. I feel like I'm deciding things all the time.
We like to think so, but maybe it's more like we're these complex systems running on some pretty deep programming. The key thing is, what we focus on feels like conscious control, but the rest, the habits, the routines, they often just run invisibly in that background.
Okay, so if there's this programming, this deep stuff, where does it come from? What builds it? What are the structures behind it all?
Good question. You could think of it like a behavioral architecture.
Okay, architecture.
I like that. Yeah, it's like the foundation, the framework of habits and patterns that holds up our daily life. And it's got layers.
Layers.
There's what you might call temporal scaffolding. Think about your morning routine, how you wind down at night. That structures your time, right?
Absolutely. Coffee first, always.
Exactly. Then there are decision pathways, your go-to choices in common situations. Like, what's your automatic reaction when you feel stressed? You reach for your phone, go for a walk.
Phone, probably. More often than I'd like.
See, that's a pathway. We also have emotional response patterns, conditioned reactions. If something bad happened in a certain kind of place, you might feel anxious going into a similar place, even if it's totally safe now.
Right. That lingering feeling.
And finally, there's attention allocation. Where does your mental energy just naturally go? If you're worried about money, you might automatically notice prices everywhere.
Okay, wow. That's quite a framework. Temporal scaffolding, decision pathways, emotional responses, attention.
They all weave together.
And I guess the more we use these paths, these scripts, the deeper the grooves get.
Precisely. Repetition is key. It makes those pathways easier and easier to follow. It connects to a Gestalt idea, closure.
Closure.
Our minds like completing patterns. Once a behavioral loop starts, there's this pull to finish it, to keep it going, even if maybe it's not actually helping us anymore.
So the brain's preference for tidiness, for completing the loop, actually keeps us stuck sometimes.
It can, yeah. It reinforces what's already there. It's efficient, but not always effective for growth or change.
You mentioned these patterns often start early. How much does childhood shape this architecture?
Oh, hugely. Those critical developmental periods are often when the foundations are laid. We're learning to adapt to our environment, our family, social expectations.
Like learning the rules of the game at home.
Exactly. A child figures out how to navigate the family system. Maybe they learn to be quiet to avoid conflict, or maybe they learn to be loud to get attention. Those strategies become deeply ingrained.
And they stick around.
They become part of our psychological infrastructure, yeah. They color how we see things, how we interact, long after we've left that original environment. Those early tracks are deep.
So the quiet kid might become the adult who struggles to ask for a raise, even if their boss is really approachable. The old program's still running.
That's a perfect illustration, and it highlights something crucial. The difference between our actual present needs and our perceived needs from way back then.
Okay.
Those early automatic behaviors, they were often about perceived safety, perceived acceptance. But as adults, our real needs might be totally different, maybe for connection or authenticity.
But the autopilot keeps running the old safety program.
It can, yes. It responds to the old perception, not the current reality. Someone who learned don't show sadness, it makes mom uncomfortable, might suppress their feelings in a loving relationship where vulnerability would actually build closeness.
Wow. So the original need becomes this automatic habit disconnected from now.
It's like an unresolved tension, an incomplete picture from the past driving behavior in the present. Trying to find closure, perhaps, but in a way that doesn't quite fit anymore.
This really makes you question, well, your sense of self, doesn't it? If so much is automatic, who's the I making the choices? What about free will?
It absolutely brings those questions to the fore. It invites us to look at the authorship of our lives. If, say, 95% isn't a direct conscious choice, what does agency even mean? It pushes us to examine how authentic our felt experiences and decisions really are.
Yeah, it's a bit mind-bending.
Yeah.
But hang on, this automaticity, it can be incredibly useful too, right?
Oh, definitely.
Like a master musician just playing, lost in the music, or an athlete making a split-second move. That's not conscious step-by-step thinking.
Not at all. That's high-level automation. It frees up our conscious mind, our limited attention, to focus on higher-level aspects, like interpretation or strategy. It allows for incredible fluency and skill.
So automation isn't the enemy.
No, not inherently. It's a powerful tool. The problem comes when we mistake the automated pattern for a conscious choice. Or, more significantly, when the automation leads us away from what we genuinely value or desire.
Okay. Like staying in that job you mentioned earlier, the one that's comfortable, feels safe, but doesn't actually light you up.
Exactly. The autopilot is set to familiarity equals security, perhaps.
Even if you're miserable.
Right. And from that Gestalt view, that's a failure to clearly distinguish the figure, the unsatisfying present from the ground, all the other possibilities you're not letting yourself see or feel.
So the familiar pattern obscures the alternatives.
It can, yes. It keeps the focus narrow.
Wow.
This leads to what we'd call unfinished business, those ignored desires, those unexplored paths. They don't just disappear, they create a subtle, persistent tension under the surface.
So we're living in these grooves, maybe without even knowing they are grooves. It's like you're living in a house and you notice the paint peeling, but you don't realize the foundations are shifting.
That's a great metaphor, yes. We tinker with the surface habits, but the deep programming, the shifting foundation, often remains unseen, operating outside awareness.
But sometimes you get a flicker, right? That feeling of, wait, why am I doing this again?
Those moments are crucial. Glimmers of awareness. They create a little bit of friction, a tension between the old pattern and a nascent sense of something else being possible.
Like a glitch in the matrix?
Sort of. It's an opportunity. In Gestalt terms, it's a chance for a new figure to emerge from the ground, a chance to reorganize perception. That tension is actually the engine for potential change.
But it's so easy to just brush it off, isn't it? To rationalize, oh, I'm just tired, or it's just easier this way, we smooth it over.
Oh, absolutely. The mind is incredibly adept at maintaining the status quo, at rationalizing existing patterns. It's like perceptual constancy. You know how you see a door as rectangular even when it looks like a trapezoid from an angle?
Yeah.
Our minds do that with behavior too. We smooth out the inconsistencies, justify the patterns to maintain a sense of coherence, even if that coherence is built on shaky ground.
So real freedom.
Yeah.
It's not just about having choices, is it? It's about first seeing the patterns that are often making the choices for us.
Beautifully put. Freedom isn't just the absence of external constraints, it's the presence of internal awareness. True autonomy, you could say, requires the courage to question these invisible forces, this architecture that shapes so much of our doing. Without that awareness, we might just be acting out a script written long ago.
Wow, okay. This is really making me reconsider, well, pretty much my entire day. All the little habits, the routines.
It's a lot to take in. And understanding how these habits work together is key. They aren't just isolated little actions.
Right, you said they're interconnected, not just one habit here, one there.
Exactly. Think of it like an ecosystem, or maybe a web. Each habit is a thread connected to others. Pull on one, and the whole web can shift.
Like, if I start waking up earlier, suddenly I have time for breakfast, which means I have more energy, which means I'm less grumpy with my colleagues.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Precisely that kind of thing. That small shift, waking up early, creates ripples through your whole behavioral field, your life space, as Kurt Lewin called it. It's not just about the extra hour, it's about how that hour reorganizes the rest of the system.
The whole is greater than the sum of its parts.
That's a core Gestalt principle, yes. Habits combine, they interact, and they form these larger, coherent wholes that shape our entire experience of reality. Think about someone whose habit is to check their phone first thing in the morning.
Guilty.
Right. That single habit might trigger a cascade. Checking emails leads to stress. Seeing social media leads to comparison. It sets a whole tone. It's not just checking the phone, it's configuring your consciousness for the day.
Oof. Yeah, okay. So how does the brain actually build these habits? You mentioned pathways.
It relates to neuroplasticity. Every time you repeat an action, especially if there's some kind of reward, however small, you strengthen the connections between the neurons involved.
Like wearing a path in the grass.
Exactly like that. It becomes the path of least resistance. Over time, less conscious effort is needed. The signal flows easily, it becomes automatic. So yes, habits literally sculpt the brain's pathways, making the behavior more likely to recur. There's this idea of isomorphism, too.
Iso what?
Isomorphism. It suggests a correspondence, a structural similarity between brain processes and our subjective experience. So the neural patterns underlying a habit actually shape how we perceive and experience the world related to that habit.
So the brain wiring and the feeling, the experience, they kind of mirror each other.
That's the idea. They co-create each other, in a way. And this ties back to figure ground. Habits love to sink into the background, right?
Yeah, that's the autopilot thing.
Exactly. Think about emotional eating. The act itself often becomes background noise. The figure might be the stress relief, however temporary. To change it, you often need to reverse that make the act of eating the figure. Bring it into sharp focus. I am now picking up this cookie.
Making the unconscious conscious.
Precisely. That shift in attention is often the first crucial step.
What about habits that feel really persistent? Like you try to stop, but they just keep popping up. You mentioned unfinished business.
Yes, that connects to something called the Zeigarnik effect. Heard that?
Vaguely. Remind me.
It's the tendency to remember unfinished tasks better than completed ones. There's a mental tension created by incompleteness.
Okay.
Well, some persistent habits might be like that. They could stem from an incomplete gestalt, an unresolved emotional situation from the past. The habit becomes a sort of displaced attempt to find closure, to relieve that underlying tension.
So like someone compulsively cleaning might actually be trying to manage a feeling of inner chaos or powerlessness stemming from way back.
That's a potential interpretation, yes. The cleaning provides a sense of order and completion, but it doesn't resolve the original source of the tension. The business remains unfinished, so the habit persists as a way to cope, albeit indirectly.
Wow. Okay, so stopping the habit might require dealing with that older stuff.
Often, yes, or at least becoming aware of the connection. Awareness itself can be transformative. Directing attention to the automatic pattern, to the urge, can trigger what Gestalt calls insight, a sudden reorganization of how you see the situation.
Like those optical illusions. The vase and the faces.
Exactly like Rubens' vase. You see the vase, then suddenly pop, you see the faces. The elements are the same, but the perceived pattern, the meaning, shifts entirely. Awareness can do that for habits.
But trying really hard to break a habit? Sometimes that backfires, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. This brings us to the paradox of control, or maybe the paradoxical theory of change, as Arnold Beiser formulated it based on Fritz Perls' work. The idea is that change happens not by trying to force ourselves to be something we're not, but by more fully becoming aware of and accepting who we are right now, including the unwanted habit.
Accepting the habit. That sounds counterintuitive.
It does. But think of Fritz Perls' concept of creative indifference. It's not apathy, it's a kind of non-attached awareness. Observing the pattern, the urge, the habit, without judgment, without immediately trying to wrestle it into submission.
Just watching it.
Watching it, understanding its function, feeling the tension it holds. Paradoxically, this kind of deep acceptance and awareness often allows the pattern to loosen its grip, to transform more organically. It aligns with the organism's natural tendency towards self-regulation and growth.
So instead of fighting the river, you sort of observe how it flows and maybe gently nudge the banks?
That's a lovely analogy, yes. Fighting it often creates more turbulence. Understanding the flow allows for wiser interaction.
You mentioned isomorphism before, the link between brain patterns and experience. Does that mean changing habits requires changing the brain?
Fundamentally, yes. Those habit fields, the neural networks, and the behavioral patterns are structurally similar and self-perpetuating. Changing a deep habit isn't just about willpower. It requires a reorganization of that entire field.
That sounds like a huge task.
It can be, but it doesn't always require massive upheaval. Think about the power of small shifts.
Micro-habits.
Sort of, but maybe think micro-gestalts. Small moments of completion, small reorganizations of perception or behavior, like noticing the urge to check your phone and consciously taking one deep breath instead. It's a tiny shift, a small completion of a different pattern.
And these small shifts add up.
They can. Think of the principle of pregnance, the tendency towards the simplest, most stable organization. Small shifts repeated can accumulate and eventually tip the balance, leading to a larger reorganization, like one snowflake triggering an avalanche.
Wow. So small changes can potentially cascade.
Exactly. And this leads to emergent properties. A collection of small, positive habits doesn't just add up. It can create a lifestyle, a way of being that's qualitatively different. Positive feedback loops can get going.
Or negative ones, I guess.
Or negative ones, absolutely. The system reinforces itself, for better or worse.
What about time? Routines feel satisfying. Is there a Gestalt reason for that?
Our brains seem wired to complete temporal patterns, too. Routines provide a predictable structure, a sense of flow and completion over time. It's satisfying. You might even see fractal patterns, similar structures repeating at different timescales, like daily routines echoing weekly rhythms.
And all this happens within our environment, right? It's not just in our heads.
Crucially, yes. Habit fields are ecologically valid. They're interwoven with our physical surroundings, our social relationships, our cultural norms. You can't really understand a habit without considering its context.
Which means changing habits often means changing the context too.
It certainly helps. Trying to build a meditation habit in a chaotic house is harder than in a quiet corner. Environmental supports, social supports, they are vital parts of the field.
So if we understand all this, the architecture, the habits, the fields, does that give us freedom? Or are we just seeing the machinery more clearly?
The paradox of freedom, that's a deep one. Gestalt thinking talks about the choice point.
Choice point.
These fleeting moments, often barely noticed, where perception shifts just slightly, offering a glimpse of an alternative way of being or responding. It's like standing on a mountain ridge. The familiar path is clear, but for a second you see another valley, another possibility.
And we usually just snap back to the familiar path.
Often, yes, because choosing the unknown path, the new possibility, involves expanding our perceptual field to hold both the old and the new simultaneously. Seeing them both clearly. That takes awareness and sometimes courage.
So freedom isn't just rejecting the old pattern.
Perhaps not. Perhaps true freedom lies in understanding the pattern so deeply, its origins, its function, that you can transform its meaning, integrate it differently, rather than just fighting it.
Which brings us back to that creative indifference idea. Not fighting, but understanding.
Exactly. Revisiting the illusion of control. Genuine change often emerges when we surrender the desperate need to control and instead cultivate that deep, non-judgmental awareness. Observe the pattern. Let it be seen.
Like the river and the boulder again. Fighting the boulder is exhausting. Understanding the river's flow lets you work with it.
Precisely. But this path, this deepening awareness, it has its own challenges. As we look closer at our habits, we inevitably encounter the parts of ourselves we've avoided.
The unfinished business stuff.
Yeah.
The shadows.
Those aspects, those incomplete gestalts, often lie beneath the surface habits. Bringing them into consciousness, into the figure, can be uncomfortable, even painful. But it's often essential for real growth, for moving towards integration, self-actualization.
So awareness isn't just sunshine and roses. It means facing the uncomfortable bits too.
It often does. It's part of the cycle of experience awareness, leads to encountering blocks, working through them leads to integration and new possibilities.
You mentioned fractal patterns earlier. Do habits work like that too? Simple behaviors repeating.
There's a sense of that, yes. Simple behavioral loops or ways of perceiving can repeat across different scales of our lives, in relationships, at work, in how we treat ourselves. It connects to complexity theory. Small initial conditions can lead to vastly different outcomes. Tiny shifts in core patterns can ripple outwards.
Yeah, we're not islands, right? Our patterns exist within bigger patterns.
Absolutely. We're embedded in larger gestalts, family systems, social groups, cultural norms. Recognizing this brings both humility, we're part of something bigger, and responsibility. Our patterns influence the larger whole.
Which makes you wonder, who is the chooser then? If our choices emerge from these complex, often unconscious interacting patterns,
A profound philosophical question. Maybe consciousness itself is an emergent property of this whole complex field. Maybe personal responsibility isn't about being a totally independent chooser, but about how we participate in the ongoing organization and reorganization of our experience.
participating in the pattern. I like that. It feels less about fighting and more about engaging.
Mm-hmm. And it acknowledges that our understanding is always incomplete. There's always more ground, more context, what Pearls called the fertile void, the unknown potential from which new figures can emerge. Habits, then, aren't just rigid structures. They can be doorways to unexplored possibilities if we approach them with curiosity.
Suspending disbelief a bit, being open.
Yes, that willingness to suspend judgment, to be open to seeing differently. Life itself seems to operate on these principles, this constant dance between the drive for completion and stability and the pull towards openness and novelty. Our personal struggles with habits mirror this universal tension.
So it's like we're part of an unfinished symphony. Our habits, our patterns, our individual notes contributing to the larger piece.
That's a beautiful way to put it. And just as we contribute, the larger cultural gestalts influence our individual patterns back. It's reciprocal.
So it's an ongoing journey, isn't it? Moving from just running on autopilot to more consciously participating.
Always ongoing. And the patterns themselves transform us as we engage with them, hopefully leading to deeper awareness, greater integration.
So we don't arrive at a neat answer, a fixed solution.
Rarely. More like arriving at a threshold of wondering, of mystery. Under the light of awareness, even ingrained habits can start to soften, to appear less like fixed statues and more like fluid configurations within the field.
So the question becomes, how do we dance with these patterns? Do we resist them, try to control them, or learn to flow with them wisely?
That might be the core question. Perhaps freedom isn't escaping the patterns altogether, but finding harmony within the infinite potential that patterns hold.
Okay, lots to think about there. So as you go about your day, the learner, maybe notice those autopilot moments with, well, with fresh eyes. Think about the familiar routines, the automatic reactions. What's figure for you right now? What's the ground supporting it? This whole dive into autopilot and the Gestalt view, it really gives you a different lens, doesn't it? For seeing those invisible forces.
Hopefully.
And it's not about getting rid of all patterns, but maybe bringing them into awareness, creating those choice points, making space for a more conscious, maybe more authentic experience.
Exactly. Awareness is the key.
We hope this sparks some curiosity, encourages you to maybe look a little deeper into your own behavioral architecture.
Yeah.
What unfinished business might be humming away in the background? What small shift, what tiny micro-gestalt could start a ripple?
Good questions to hold.
Just some things to ponder as you continue learning and discovering.